I consider Dynasty Warriors 2 through 5 the classic era of the series. Dynasty Warriors 4 remains on top as my personal favorite classic entry in the series. After playing the hell out of Dynasty Warriors 3, I was hyped so hard for this game. I even played the demo that I had received in a PlayStation magazine months before its retail release. This was also the first game to receive an Empires expansion, taking the game in a more tactical route, making the player use more strategy. This was also the first game to allow you to play as your own custom character. But as time passed and newer games were released, did this game lose its charm? Let's jump in and find out with the first Pro. There are several minor improvements from the previous game that have to make it as its own Pro. First of all, the graphics have had an amazing overhaul. The last two games had a more cartoonish style to them, and this entry looks more realistic. The voice acting also portrays this. You can tell that there was a definite increase in quality. Every voice has been recast, and for the better. You can tell these actors take their roles more seriously. These are welcome changes that help with the immersion, because I doubt anyone felt more into a game after a line like this was spoken.
Feel the power of my magic!
Duels are now something, and though rare, add a bit more depth to the combat. Every character's moveset has been tweaked. Alternate costumes make a return, this time in the vanilla game, and more costumes are to be had. They are no longer dependent on whether you've beaten the story, but on each character's rank. First, you'll unlock an alternate color palette. Next, you'll unlock an altered version of the original outfit. This could have been a concept version or something. Either way, the slightly altered costumes are really cool. And last but not least, you unlock the character's Dynasty Warriors 3 costume. I used to play these costumes a lot when I was younger. Nostalgia is strong with this one. By the way, the music? God, the music! Using hard rock and metal sounds along with traditional Chinese instruments gives this game even more immersion. The soundtrack is my favorite to all Dynasty Warriors games ever. There aren't many entries that I would say I go out of my way to listen to. Dynasty Warriors 4 is the best soundtrack. If I could review the soundtrack alone, it'd be 10 out of 10. No questions. Con! Some of the minor tweaks and changes that were made weren't necessarily the best decisions. Some of the changes at the time of release seemed minuscule and didn't matter, but now I know they're just not needed. First of all, the weapons. You no longer pick up different weapons like in Dynasty Warriors 3. You have a weapon level. This only increases when you defeat officers who give you weapon experience. I didn't like this when it was first released, but I got used to it, and I still don't really like it. I accept that it's the game's way of giving you the character's weapons, but I like going back and sometimes using the first weapon and running into a level. Also, I mentioned earlier that this is the first game that you can create your own character in. You don't really get much to customize your character with. There are obviously 2 genders, 3 different of each headgear, body armor, and leg armor. You can pick any color of any faction in the game, and you can only pick between sword, spear, pike, greatsword if you're a dude, and rapier if you're dudette. This isn't enough to feel fully customizable and leaves you wanting much more. In Empires, you get a bit more selection and you can use anyone's weapons, but it's still not the same as most other custom character creators from games around the same time. There was also a PSP game that was released with similar looking character designs. Because of this, I honestly thought it was a port of Dynasty Warriors 4. Alas, it sucked. You couldn't keep your weapon levels between stages, and you go back and forth between very, very, very small stages. It is very similar to the Game Boy Advance game that was released during Dynasty Warriors 4's relevance, and I didn't really like it that much either. Lastly, bows are still useless. Horse combat, though slightly more refined, is also useless. You can also click R3 to do a taunt that'll stun enemies and leave them open for an attack. Oh, did that sound like a pro to you? Well, it's not, because your taunt animation lasts just as long as their stun animation, rendering it, you guessed it, useless. Pro! Extreme Mode, added thanks to the Xtreme Legends expansion pack, allows you to play through smaller stages, hire allies and troops, and travel all over the place. The biggest challenge here is that you don't recover health between stages. You have to buy meat buns to regain your health. You can also buy troops, officers, and stat upgrades. You are also given smaller missions every now and then during the stages that will grant you bonuses if you can complete them. The mode is a lot of fun to see how far you can get. Sadly, it's not 2-player, but it doesn't really need to be. It's almost a survival mode in the game to see how long you can last. I remember playing this a lot when I first got the Xtreme Legends expansion. To make it 2-player, my friends and I would take turns through the stages, and whoever's turn it was, they got to decide what to buy before the stage. It was a lot of fun. Even while I write this script, all I can think is how great it would be to have something like this added into the newer Warriors titles. A similar feeling mode was given to us in Berserk and the Band of the Hawk in the form of the Eternal Eclipse. It's not quite the same, but it's close enough in my opinion. If this mode makes a comeback, I'd be very happy. Con! With the exception of the aforementioned Extreme Mode, the Xtreme Legends expansion doesn't really expand on what we already have with the vanilla game. Yes, you get the 5th weapons, but the new Legend Mode only allows you to play through 1 new stage per character. This is a glorified free mode. Also, I'd barely call them stages because they're more like a character-specific challenge. The previous expansion allowed you to play through new stages and gave us alternate costumes. I would have liked to see more costumes, and if they saved the other story modes for the expansion, this would have been more worth it. Hell, if they added stuff to the custom characters, I wouldn't be riffing on it as much. If you want to play Dynasty Warriors 4, unless you can find Xtreme Legends for about $5 or something, I would not recommend it. If I were only to rate the Xtreme Legends expansion, I'd only give this a 3 out of 10, as it doesn't have enough to keep me coming back to it. When recording, I'd be constantly reinstalling the original data, unlike Dynasty Warriors 3 Xtreme Legends, where I could still enjoy the story mode and free mode with the Xtreme Legends stages. Pro! Each dynasty now gets their own story, and you can choose from different characters within that faction. I much prefer this as it doesn't allow for characters to share the same stages throughout their stories. Now each dynasty starts with the same 2 chapters, but then progress differently depending on how you complete the stages. For example, if you kill Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang in the first 2 stages, they will not appear in the 3rd stage. However, you can either let them escape, or you can go straight to the 3rd stage if you want. It does make unlocking characters more difficult, but then it makes you want to replay the story again and again. There was one character who gave me a lot of grief to unlock. You have to have a side chapter appear and beat it, but it was difficult to have it appear in the first place. But that didn't deter me from replaying the story over and over until it happened. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that there's secret stages that appear when you beat previous stages in a certain way. Like if you allowed Deng Zhuo or Zhang Jiao to escape during their final stages of their chapters. They may reappear in a secret chapter. This story mode is much more intricate than before and beefs up replayability tenfold. You can also bring your custom characters into the story. During some cutscenes, whoever you're playing as will appear and maybe even have a line or two. These cutscenes can be triggered by every single character, including custom ones. That's awesome and makes it feel like you, the player, are making a difference on the battlefield. God! Where do I start? Dynasty Warriors 4 Empires does a lot wrong, and all the things that it does right do not make up for it. When it was announced, the entire community got excited. It was Dynasty Warriors but with a tactical edge. Though it added a bit of strategy to the mix, the overall execution of the game fell flat. Let's start with some of the better things that it did. It gave you more to work with for the custom characters, as I said earlier, but it only adds so much. You can now select between 3 different kinds of character types with each gender. Again, this leaves more to be desired for the custom characters. You can also play as the generic officers. This is fun for a little bit until the novelty wears off. I actually played a lot with the generic characters when this game first came out because that was the biggest thing to me. So many new characters to play as. You can also inspect the character models in the gallery. This is pretty cool if you didn't unlock the 4th and 5th weapons in the vanilla or Xtreme Legends versions. You can also look at the generic officers and troops. And that's about it for good things. Now on to the bad things. First thing is the weapons and items. The levels restart every time you start a story. The only way to increase the levels is by taking over the proper areas and selecting to upgrade those weapons when they are available. Also, you need the correct amount of gold, and you don't get to choose which weapon or items get the level up. Your officers do. Also, you start from the Yellow Turban campaign when you start the story. It is really difficult to stick it out to the final stages like Wu Zhang or Yi Ling. You need to make sure the needed factions are still alive and that you continue to do what's right to meet the requirements. All in all, the Empires game is a letdown. I really wanted to be able to carry over my weapons and items when I started to play a new game. As I gave Xtreme Legends a rating, I'll rate Empires 5 out of 10. It's still enjoyable for what it is, but it leaves you wanting a hell of a lot more. Overall, I know my cons seem to have more weight than my pros, but Dynasty Warriors 4 remains my favorite of the classic games, which range between Dynasty Warriors 2 and 5. Dynasty Warriors 4, to me, has the most amount of replayability. When you combine the vanilla and the Xtreme Legends, everything that the expansion has going wrong with it disappear. Though when you add the Empires, it still leaves you wanting a bit more. That being said, Dynasty Warriors 4 was the game I kept coming back to as a kid. I continued to play it even when Dynasty Warriors 5 was released. And even now, if ever a classic Dynasty Warriors gets an HD remastering, I would hope that it would be this one. Please, Koei, if you can hear me, at least release this as one of the PS2 on PS4 games. Add some trophies to it and I'll be the happiest warrior out there. So with everything being considered, I give Dynasty Warriors 4 along with the Xtreme Legends and Empires releases an 8.5 out of 10. The Empires version brings down the rating a little bit on this one, but the core game is definitely the best of the classics. Give it a try and I'll see you tomorrow for the next entry. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to get the rest of Musome's videos in your feed. What did you think of this video? Did I leave anything out? Which Dynasty Warriors game was your favorite? I always considered 2 to 5 to be the classic age and Dynasty Warriors 6 and on to be the new age. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to continue writing my 10,000 word essay on why Dynasty Warriors 4 needs an HD remastering.